In this video, I will argue why Aimee Semple McPherson, also known as Sister Aimee, should be restored to the Henrietta text. I will be discussing her life story, some aspects of her personality, and her contributions to society. Aimee Semple McPherson was a fundamentalist and Pentecostal who lived from 1890 to 1944. She exhibited an eccentric personality and became a celebrity in both the religious and secular sense. She tactfully used her preaching to gain popularity and fostered her own denomination of Christianity that still exists today. She was an extremely controversial figure due to her gender, history of divorce, showy preaching style, and theatrical personality. To better understand her story, let's define some terms. Evangelicalism is a worldwide Protestant movement with a focus on the experience of conversion, a personal relationship with God, the authority of the Bible, and missions. Fundamentalists were evangelicals who were unhappy with emerging trends in American Protestantism during the Progressive Era. They challenged evolution and changing standards of morality while emphasizing a literal interpretation of the Bible. Pentecostals are fundamentalists who focus on baptism with the Holy Spirit, which occurred after conversion. It was an emotional experience and includes speaking in tongues. All Pentecostals are evangelicals, but not all evangelicals are Pentecostals. Henrietta briefly mentions Aimee, naming her as the first modern evangelist, crediting her for the founding of the Foursquare Gospel Church, and emphasizing her success as a preacher. It also lists some of the methods she used to attain her popularity. However, it greatly discounts her drama-filled life and contributions to religion, human welfare, and changing women's roles in society. So now, let's take a look at her life. Aimee was born as Aimee Elizabeth Kennedy in Salford, Ontario, Canada. She was exposed to religion at an early age by her mother, who worked in Salvation Army soup kitchens. As a kid, she enjoyed playing Salvation Army with her classmates and preaching sermons to her dolls. As a teenager, she began to push back on her mother's teachings. She read novels, watched movies, and attended dances, which both the Salvation Army and her Methodist father did not approve of. Aimee herself would later call these activities the devil's work. In high school, she learned about the theory of evolution, which she was unhappy about. She decided to write to a Canadian newspaper to combat the use of taxpayer money to fund the teaching of evolution. People all over the country responded to her letter, marking her first experience with fame. In 1907, Aimee met Robert James Semple at a revival meeting. Semple was a Pentecostal missionary from Ireland. That same year, Aimee converted to Pentecostalism, and in 1908, she and Semple got married. They moved to Chicago, where they joined William Durham's Full Gospel Assembly. While there, Aimee was taught the practice of interpretation of tongues. This process involves translating the messages of someone speaking in tongues, which essentially is a speaker uttering sounds in a language unknown to them. During an evangelistic mission in China in 1910, both Robert and Aimee contracted malaria. While Aimee recovered, Robert got dysentery and died. After her recovery, Aimee gave birth to their daughter, Roberta Semple Salter. Following her daughter's birth, Aimee moved back to the U.S. and worked in the Salvation Army with her mother in New York City. While living in New York City, Aimee met Harold Stewart McPherson. They got married in 1912 and moved to Providence, Rhode Island, where they had their son, Rolf McPherson. In 1914, Aimee suffered from appendicitis and claimed that she heard a voice asking her to preach, and she claimed to be able to move without pain after agreeing to the challenge. Following this incident, in 1915, she left her husband and took her kids to take part in evangelistic work. After a few weeks, she invited him to join her, which he accepted. The family lived out of their gospel car, which they used to travel the U.S. to participate in religious and revival meetings. Aimee focused much of her preaching on faith healing and speaking in tongues. She discouraged the loud and emotional outbursts typical in Pentecostal meetings, instead trying to find a middle ground between the enthusiasm and cold emotionalist churches. She set aside separate spaces for passionate people to express themselves during sermons. During their time on the road, Aimee's popularity soared, but tensions between her and Harold grew, mainly caused by Aimee's continued commitment to preaching and Harold's desire for her to take on a more traditional homemaker role. This divide eventually led to their divorce in 1921. Before her and Harold's divorce, in 1918, Aimee decided to move to Los Angeles, where she spent 4 years raising funds for and building a church. In Los Angeles, she preached to locals and tourists, who spread her name upon returning to their homes, greatly boosting her popularity. In 1923, construction of the Angelus Temple was complete. It was dedicated as the Church of the Foursquare Gospel and became extremely popular, with 40 million visitors in its first 7 years of being open. Aimee preached every night with a dramatic spectacle, and the temple broadcasted her services on the radio. On May 18th of 1926, Aimee disappeared off Santa Monica Beach. Through weeks of searching, the Angelus Temple received phone calls reporting sightings all over the country or demanding ransoms, and eventually her family gave in to belief that she had drowned in the ocean. A memorial service was held on June 23rd, after which the temple received a call from an Arizona hospital that Aimee was there and alive. When she returned to Los Angeles, she was received by a crowd of around 40,000 people. She claimed she had been drugged and kidnapped by a couple on the beach and taken to a shack in the Mexican desert. She then escaped through a window and walked miles to civilization. She maintains this story, but it was widely debated by the public. She was tried in court for criminal conspiracy, with prosecutors accusing her of having an affair with her former employee, Kenneth Ormiston. However, the charges were dropped when Ormiston claimed it was a different woman with which he had had an affair. The controversy around her disappearance soured the press's opinion of her. She tried to appease Hollywood by dyeing her hair, wearing makeup, and wearing stylish clothes. Her new look disappointed some church members, but ultimately increased her fame. She depressed stores and tried to blur the line between the secular and the religious. She was rumored to be seen drinking and smoking on such stores, despite being a prohibitionist. Aimee's mother, Mildred Kennedy, who was a major pillar in the success and leadership of the Angelus Temple, disapproved of Aimee's actions. She left the temple in 1927, and the temple suffered from her absence. After many unsuccessful projects and ventures leading the temple into debt, Mildred decided to return in 1929 to help. However, it didn't last. Mildred left again in 1930, and soon after, Aimee suffered a nervous breakdown, causing her to take a 10-month break from preaching. Aimee returned to preaching in 1931, introducing a new sermon titled Attar of Roses. She went on a national revival tour between 1933 and 1934 with a crew of musicians, stylists, and scene designers. This tour boasted an attendance record of 2 million people across 336 meetings. Although her reputation improved, she never fully escaped controversy. In 1932, she married actor and musician David Hutton, whose scandalous lifestyle hurt the reputation of both Aimee and her church. They divorced in 1934. She also experienced a falling out with her mother, daughter, and assistant pastor in the late 1930s. During World War II, Aimee showed marked patriotism. In 1942, she sold $150,000 of war bonds in only an hour, then performed a similar feat in 1944. She welcomed men from the military and even awarded some of them with Bibles on the platform of her temple. She taught first aid classes and held emergency drills. She led all-night meetings on Fridays to pray for the war effort. For her contributions, the U.S. Army made her an honorary colonel, and the U.S. Treasury awarded her a special citation. Even President Franklin D. Roosevelt recognized her for her efforts. While on a trip to Oakland, California for revival meetings, Aimee died of an overdose of sleeping pills. Throughout her life, she had dealt with numerous health problems, and she was taking the pills to help them. However, there were various unprescribed pills found in her room. This led some to believe that she had committed suicide, but most believed it to be an accident. 45,000 people attended her funeral, and her grave was surrounded by $50,000 worth of flowers, truly displaying the impact Aimee had on people's lives. To understand Aimee better, we have to take a look at her style of preaching. Aimee's preaching can be defined by two key characteristics: faith-healing and eccentric performances. Much of her early success was due to her alleged abilities in faith healing. She claimed she could heal the sick and injured through touch because she had the power of God in her, which attracted tens of thousands to her meetings. She began participating in faith healing less as time went on, opting for more intricate performances in her sermons. Her meetings were spectacles that included performances from a 50-member band, dramatic acting, singing, flamboyant stage sets, and intense preaching. She wore extravagant costumes and acted outlandishly. She used this behavior to increase her presence in the press and pull in more followers. The performances and optimistic messages she preached greatly contributed to her popularity and fame as a minister as well as celebrity. Now that we've established who she was, we can take a deeper look into the contributions Aimee made to society. Aimee was extremely active in charity work. Not only did she encourage her congregation to take part in charity, but her own temple's commissary delivered more aid to families than any other public or private institution at the time. The Angelus Temple offered food, clothing, and blankets while collecting donations for philanthropic purposes. She had a free clinic, ran the free school lunch program after the government discontinued it, and managed a cash reserve with utility companies in order to fund electricity for homes with overdue payments in the winter. Her highest priority was helping families, including non-residents from other states and Mexico. During the Great Depression, she ran soup kitchens and fed around 1.5 million people. She also helped people in disasters. During earthquakes in 1925 and 1933, she assembled people to gather and distribute food, blankets, clothing, and emergency supplies. She also headed the relief effort for a dam failure in 1928. Aimee created her own magazine called Bridal Call in 1917, and although its name changed multiple times, it continued to be published up to her death in 1944. She used the magazine to write about women's roles in religion in hopes of dismantling the prevalent sexism in religious spaces. She was the second woman to receive a broadcast license by the Department of Commerce in 1924, which she used to preach sermons via radio. She was an extremely controversial figure, partially due to her gender and history of divorces. Despite this, she broke social norms and took on a role of power, and her popularity and success are a testament to her contributions to women's societal presence. Aimee created the denomination of the Foursquare Gospel, which is defined by the belief of Jesus as a savior, baptizer, healer, and coming king. By the time of her death, the Foursquare Gospel had around 22,000 members, and today it has around 8 million members worldwide. In 1923, she founded Echo Park Evangelistic and Missionary Training Institute, now known as Life Pacific University, which trains students to become ministers. Outside of Los Angeles, she inspired other notable preachers, like Oldine Utley and Edwin Lewis Cole. She boosted Pentecostalism into widespread recognition in American culture through her innovative methods of spreading her message, her magazine, the ministers she trained and inspired, and her public presence. Aimee combated racism in religious spaces. She aided Hispanic communities in Los Angeles by developing Spanish-speaking congregations. Her tent meetings and church services were racially integrated because she believed in unifying Christians. She welcomed African American leaders associated with the 1906 Azusa Street Revival to preach in her temple. The Azusa Street Revival was a series of revival meetings led by African American preacher William Seymour. In summation, Aimee Semple McPherson had both a captivating life story and personality, and the Henrietta text grossly misrepresented the impact she had on a wide variety of subjects. As someone who received so much media attention in her life, there's a vast amount of information on her that makes her story accessible to write about. Her battles against sexism and racism and contributions to religion and charity qualify her to be immortalized in text. Therefore, she should be restored to the Henrietta text and her story more thoroughly recorded.